Hi everyone. Good afternoon to all of you. Here with us today is Shweta Ram, Solution Consultant, Adobe, who would be discussing an anecdotal case study done by Adobe. Thank you, Shweta, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Now, before I request you to take the discussion forward, I'm going to quickly ask all the delegates to keep posting their questions in the chat box, and the speaker will address a selected few of the questions at the end of the session. Over to you, Shweta.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here and happy to be here. I'll share my screen now to let me know once it's visible.
It's visible.
Thanks. So, what I'm going to do today is, since everything is digital and given that we're all on a digital platform, I'm going to talk a little bit about, how Adobe is really helping our customers change the world through digital experiences. And while the case studies are anecdotal, they'll give you a good insight into how our customers are leveraging digital today to kind of better the experiences for their clients. So happy to hear out any questions and would love to answer them as we go. This is a very familiar, I don't know how many of us have actually seen this, right? I mean, it's very interesting that not like a few of the people that I spoke to, right? People who've recently come to join the workforce. When I sort of checked with them or checked with my colleagues saying, do you guys know what this is, right? Not many people had even seen something like this. So this is something that used to be called a rolodex, right? So what is a rolodex? A rolodex was an erstwhile, system where people would kind of maintain the contact details of customers, prospects, friends, family, everybody. And this was like a go-to place for anybody to kind of figure out, saying that if I need to reach out to someone, I need to market to somebody, I need to sell something, who do I need to, where do I go and find the contact details, right? So this was a very small and efficient way of kind of doing this a few decades ago. But we've come a really long way since then, right? So what is the new Rolodex? The CRM system has become, the CRM system is the was the replacement for something like a Rolodex because things started getting more complicated. The amount of data that was available from a customer was a lot. The information that the customer wanted was huge, and it was no longer possible for you to kind of maintain all of this within this box, right? And something similar is now happening when we come to digital experience or customer experience, right? So when we started off on this digital journey or as digital transformation, as people call it, it's not new, right? I mean, we've been digitizing systems, processes for a very, very long time, and companies have been doing it for decades now. But what has really changed is, unlike the earlier times where digital was restricted to back office systems or front office sort of systems, now digital has moved to the hands of the customer. And every business today has necessarily, either by choice or by circumstances or by competition, has necessarily become a digital experience business. And we at Adobe, believe that experience is a true differentiator, because after a point in time when the product differentiation becomes very, very little, the power is completely in the hands of the consumer, and the consumer expects a digital experience to be delivered to him in a very seamless manner. And why does that happen, right? Because today, if you see your customers or the people that you are trying to sell to or engage with, they now decide where they want to buy from, where they want to engage with you, right? Take a look at all of the touch points that we interact with. So I have a desktop through which I would try to kind of find information. I have a mobile phone. There is email, there is WhatsApp, there is SMS, there are chatbots. It's almost an explosion of things, right? There is so much for any brand to kind of think of. And where the unlike earlier where the entire buying cycle or the entire buying journey used to be very complex, what we realized when we kept talking to a lot of our customers or a lot of the brands who interact with us is uh, they slowly started saying, hey, you know what, my customer today is on TikTok, right? So that was a phenomena, say 6 months back, and then 6 months later, TikTok is gone. That's because of regulation. Then they started saying that, hey, there is a new platform that's come up. I want to be there because my customers are there. Or they would say that, hey, you know what, a new video format has come up. I no longer want long videos. I want shorter bite-sized videos. So if you realize, or if you think through all of these conversations, what has really changed from how things were maybe a few years ago is the kind of content that a brand puts out, or the kind of information that the brand puts out is now uh, is now sort of demanded by the customer, and that kind of determines how do you kind of look at all of these things. And that brings me to three large things. So when we look at digital, or when we look at digital experience, we've bucketed this entire experience into three pieces. That's because we don't think digital transformation or digital experience is necessarily a one sort of a solution, right? It's not a magic pill. You do this and digital is sort of done, right? So it requires you to bring together a lot of different pieces. And we as Adobe, we largely see this happening in three buckets. We would call it as content-led experiences, wherein content sort of determines or is a differentiator for you. The second thing is data led experiences, right? So everybody is talking about data driven marketing, data driven engagement, analytics is taking the forefront. So, how do you leverage data to build better experiences? And finally, commerce led experience. And I think, COVID has sort of the joke going around these days. I think a lot of y'all would have seen it saying, who's leading digital transformation today? And the answer has become COVID. So how do you kind of deliver experiences, or how do you look at commerce-led experiences is what we're going to talk about. And I will kind of cover each of these pieces and say, how did we deliver it, or how did our clients benefit by doing some of this? If you look at this picture, right, I mean, while all of us want to be great storytellers, right? All brands want to be telling their story in different ways. How they tell the story has become very important. So imagine that I had a beautiful sort of story, or a beautiful experience that I was delivering in my retail outlet or in a physical brick and mortar sort of a environment. But suddenly everything has changed, right? Nobody's sort of going. So now how do I translate that story into a different place? So be it a desktop, be it a mobile, or be it any other platform. How can I take the same story that I was delivering beautifully in an offline sort of an environment, and how do I do it online? And how do I leverage content to kind of do this? So here is an example of what one of a leading manufacturing company has done in order to do content led transformation. So when we talk about content, right, one thing is to have different types of content, right? So today there is content explosion literally everywhere, right? People have access to so much of information. But then how do you leverage that content in a way that it's accessible to everybody? So the first large pillar that they looked at is, how do I source or how do I create content, right? Because the traditional ways of managing content, wherein you would work with agency teams or agency partners or your own in-house brand teams in order to put all of these content out, also started eventually having a IT angle to it, which is to say, where do I store all of this content? Who has access to this content? And as companies also grew across different locations, it became necessary to say, hey, even let's look at India, right? I mean, forget global. Let's look at India. India itself has so many different segments and pockets and regions where your content needs to be multilingual. Your content needs to be maybe you would have wordy content in certain places, or you would have very visual elements in certain places. So it started becoming very important for the customer or at the brand end to say, how am I going to leverage all of this content, and how do different business teams, brand managers, and IT teams manage this today, right? I cannot possibly have a SharePoint folder and manage enterprise grade content. So then they started thinking about saying that I need to have a place where I can manage and I can assemble this content in a single location, and I can do it really fast. So, in a sense, that they wanted to cut down on a lot of inefficiency, which is to say, if I've built out a piece of content for my website, I want it to be extremely reusable, whether I do a print ad on the same campaign, or whether I post it on social media, or whether it's a WhatsApp campaign, or whether it's an email campaign, because I don't want to be using the same I don't want to be, redoing or rendering the same content over and over again. And I want this to be available for different teams to use. So imagine that within an organization, a particular brand has come up with a brilliant idea and they've made a launch. They wanted the other brands to be able to leverage the same thing so that they can cross leverage these efficiencies. And not just that, right? Once you have all of this content, how do you personalize it and deliver it? So today, the same content does not fit everybody, right? So what you probably talk to my parents about is probably not going to cut ice with what the value proposition that you're going to offer to me. Primarily because my lifestyle is different, the way I live is different, the needs that I have is very different, and the touch points that I use is very different. So then they came up with the fact that, hey, you know what? I have 9 different places where anybody can access or reach out to me as a brand. How do I leverage all of this content in a way that I don't have to do too much of work? My time to market is extremely fast, and I want to be able to decimate this content really quickly. So, what they would do is they would work on the content once, but deliver it in multiple places. So, here were a few examples of some of the touch points that they had. So, they had a website, they have mobile apps, social media, they had screens at their stores, email marketing, mobile apps, single page apps. Not just that, right? Even internal teams. So, how can you leverage the same content that you've put out for, say, your customers to leverage? How can you use the same thing for your in-house team? So how can you give the same amount of information to your sales team, or how can you use the same content for your training? And again, similarly, while everybody is gung ho about digital, but print is definitely not dead. And in this category where the customer we are talking about, print was a huge thing, so then they wanted to use the same sort of technology to host all of this. And not just that, be very, very clear to say that if a customer belongs to a particular segment and they come to a particular touch point, then I want to give them extremely personalized information. And that's what they tried to do. And this is where this entire piece of something that we call as content as a service, you'd be very familiar with platform as a service or software as a service or infrastructure as a service. But today content as a service has become extremely important, because the amount of content or the velocity of content that you have to churn out has literally exploded because of the touch points, because the customers want it, because the brands are finding out various way to do it. And of course they wanted a layer of artificial intelligence and machine learning, so that you don't always have to depend on teams to decide, right? Imagine that you have 10,000 pieces of content that you've built over a year. It's humanly very, very difficult to find out which content did well, what content should I throw out, can my website automatically render itself depending on the device that somebody is coming from. I don't want to be holding different renditions of an image, right, for different screen sizes, for different mobile phones, for different data speeds that people come from, right? So while we while a lot of companies build out great stuff, one of the things that they underestimate is to say that maybe the customer who is reaching out to you is coming from a very, very poor data network. So even then, how can you pick up the right set of content, and how can you automate this entire experience so that you're able to deliver your brand value proposition in a very nice way? So this is the first example of how did the brand leverage it. So they were able to use something that Adobe was able to help them do this using something known as an experience manager solution. It is a central asset management system which allows you to create and deliver experiences across any channel, any device, any app. It provides something that, like I said, right, it provides you something known as content as a service, meaning that anytime some device or an endpoint requests for the service, it will be intelligent enough to pick up the right kind of content and also decimate it. And you're able to optimize all of the asset that you have in a very, very nice and in a neat way. And the brands that we've been working with, they've found immense value of doing something like this, because now it's extremely secure. Everything is available in a central place, and it's very, very easy for you to manage this entire thing of saying, how do I deliver content led experiences? Not just that, it gives a lot of insight to agency teams or even their brand teams to say what content gets picked up very fast, so that they are able to replicate it and not really wait for days and weeks for you to analyze and come back with what works. Now that we've spoken about the content, right, the next piece is that how can you anticipate the needs? So I've put out all of this great content. the next obvious question is, how do I anticipate my customer need, right? How can I find out what am I supposed to do next? I know that my customer loves what I've put out. They've been engaging with the brand. My click-through rates are great. But when I look at the impact on the revenue, right, or if I look at the impact on the top line or my bottom line, I don't see them buying those things or adding those things to the cart, right? So this is an example of how a e-commerce player who is our customer, how did they kind of leverage data as as an experience differentiator, and how did they kind of change experiences or deliver experiences to their customers using data as a backbone. In their case, because it was e-commerce, right? Largely, they knew, or any brand, right, would largely know who are the people who are converting versus who are the people who are not converting, which is fairly simple. Which is to say, somebody bought my product, I'm going to call them a converter. But somebody did not buy my product, I'm going to call them a non-converter. And typically, right, across brands or across product categories, what they saw is that the amount of non-converters were obviously or as expected more than the converters. But what they did is not just focus on converters, right? So a lot of brands typically focus on converters and try to say, hey, these are my best people, these are my most loyal people. Let me kind of engage with them in a better way. Let me engage with them in a very smooth way. But what this brand decided to do is they wanted to take data and they wanted to understand what is so different in a non-converter and why is it that they're not converting and what should I do about it. So then they started leveraging data to analyze these behaviors at scale, right? So in an e-commerce platform, unlike any traditional sort of a way, things happen on the fly. So if you're on the site and you don't make the purchase, then for me to get you back on the website is going to take some work for me to do, right? Because there is nobody physically there to guide you, unlike say a store where uh, if a sales assistant finds you sort of a little lost or you're looking at things, somebody could say, hey, can I help you out? But that does not happen on a platform, right? So your customers are largely left on their own to decide what they need to do. So what this customer did is they are leveraging the analytics platform that we have called the Adobe Analytics tool in order to segment people who are not converting and to find out something very, very specific, right? And to bucket them. And all of this is done on its own. They don't want to wait for days for somebody to pull out that data, do the analysis, and then take a call. So in this case, what they started doing is they looked at a couple of categories, right? Of course, there are a lot more, but I thought that this is very relatable, right? Which is to say, how much time did somebody spend on the website? How many pages did they view, right? So sometimes what happens is maybe you clicked on the website and then, because we have so many tabs open, they are they are just kind of looking at a few things. So here what they started doing is they started looking at how people are behaving. They started segmenting them really well, and they started finding out saying how many of them are spending, or what is the percentage of people on each of this, so that they're able to take a call. So then they decided that I want people who spent more time on my website, added something on the cart but did not buy anything. I want to focus on them. And that's how they started doing the next case of engagement, which is to send an emailer or send them an offer. And then what started happening when you use a platform like this is you're able to make technology transparent, right? Different teams are able to use it. Different teams are able to take calls. So your merchandising team gets information. Their product teams used to get information. Their marketing teams used to get information, and they were able to do all of this with a click of a button using a platform. And that brings me to my last piece, which is to say that at Adobe we strongly believe that people buy experiences and people don't buy products, right? But oftentimes what we end up doing is that uh, you know every moment that somebody spends on your website, you have to make it very, very personal, and you have to make that experience extremely, extremely shoppable depending on whichever life cycle they are in. And while a lot of time is spent on e-commerce people say that yes, we have an e-com portal. What they often forget is e-com portal is not just about technology, not just having people to kind of buy on the cart, right? It needs to work with your content beautifully, which is to say, I have great content, I have shoppable experiences, I have immersive experiences, and then I have data to tell me which of my experiences are working and which aren't. And that's how content plus data becomes very, very important when it comes to commerce led experience. And experience driven commerce is not just about your own website. It's about saying, can I do B2B marketplace website, or can I do direct to consumer websites, or can I build websites with my dealers or different sort of stakeholders? So summarizing what I spoke about, right? In all of these examples, what we've seen is the focus is always on experience. All of our customers are using data to make those decisions. They're making every moment personal. And when we talk about AI, the AI is not general, but it is purpose built so that you're able to leverage your AI to do build out your intelligence to drive all of these platforms. And finally, one thing to remember: it all starts with the customer, right? So if you keep your customer in the center of all of this, then all of this becomes very, very simple. Thank you.
Thank you, Shweta, for the exciting discussion. I'm afraid actually we've run out of time, so I think we're going to have to end this session here only.
Okay.
So thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you.
A special thanks to all our sponsors, Telesign, ShareChat, Blink Digital, and Nielsen. Don't forget to visit our exhibitor booths. Thank you, everyone. Stay tuned.